Uneducated, lazy labor. That is why our numbers are slipping. Thomas Reed said it directly at the delivery driver in front of 12 venture capitalists holding a $100 million check. James Anderson, 50s. Hispanic uniform, soaked through scanner, held together with dirty electrical tape, did not look down. He did not speak. He looked at the algorithm on the screen behind Thomas, clean, branded, color-coded. He looked at it for 4 seconds, silent, motionless, completely still. Then his eyes narrowed. Thomas tossed a dry erase marker at him. The plastic casing cracked against James's chest and clattered onto the glass table, thin and loud in the silence. "Go ahead," Thomas said. "Explain math to a room full of Ivy League MBAs." James caught the marker before it hit the floor. He rolled up his left sleeve slowly, deliberately exposing the faded military tattoo on his forearm. He walked to the whiteboard and word.
Wrong move. He just challenged. A master logistician to a math fight. Let me take you back.
The app is running, the delivery is already late, and James Anderson has been on the road since before the city woke up. The scanner in his hand is cracked down the middle, a diagonal fault line splitting the screen like a scar held together by 2 loops of dirty electrical tape that have begun to peel at the edges. It buzzes. It buzzes again. The red timer at the top reads late, 000412, and the number is climbing. James does not look at the timer. He already knows. The van smells like diesel and old cardboard. The heating unit stopped working 6 weeks ago, replaced by a portable fan that does nothing in June except move hot air from one side of the cab to the other. Outside, the city is in full gridlock. A school bus sits diagonally across the intersection ahead, its hazard lights blinking orange into the morning haze. James cuts left onto Meridian Street. The scanner buzzes. Late. 000544. His calves burn. He has been running since 7:08 a.m. Not jogging, running. The kind of running that comes from climbing stairs in buildings with broken elevators, 4 flights, 6 flights, carrying packages that weigh more than a child. The polyester fabric of his uniform clings to his lower back, soaked through, and when the van's AC vent catches it, the cold is sharp and specific, the kind of cold that makes a tired body feel worse than the heat did. He shifts in the seat. He does not stop driving. The Swift Drop routing app fills the top half of the cracked screen. It is by any reasonable standard a good-looking application. Clean interface, animated turn signals, color-coded zones in green, yellow, red. James has been driving for Swift Drop for 11 months, and for the first 4 of those months, he believed the app. He followed it exactly. He took the routes it gave him. He made the turns it told him to make at the speeds. It told him to make them through corridors. It told him were clear. He lost 14 packages in those 4 months. Not physically lost, timed out. Flagged as failed delivery. 3 customer complaints, a formal warning, a $200 penalty deducted silently from his paycheck labeled on the stub as route efficiency adjustment, which he only noticed because he counts every dollar. He shifted to paper after that. Not entirely, not obviously, not in any way that would get him flagged for non-compliance. He keeps the app running, he keeps his scanner active. He simply also keeps a small spiral-bound military-issue notebook on the passenger seat, its cover worn to a pale gray at the corners, and he uses it. This morning, before he pulled out of the depot lot at 6:47 a.m., he sat in the van for 9 minutes with the notebook open on the steering wheel. He mapped the first 16 stops, not the way the app maps them hub to spoke, radiating outward from the depot in a pattern that looks efficient on a map but is not efficient in traffic. He mapped them the way he was trained to map supply lines, node to node, weighted by load, by access restriction, by estimated friction at each transfer point. He drew small circles for each stop and connected them with lines annotating each junction with a number that represented time cost under current conditions. The app buzzes. Late, 000711. James checks his notebook. Stop 4 is Archdale Tower on 5th. The app wants him to continue north on Meridian, cross the Hartwell Bridge, and come at Archdale from the east. James turns west, instead cuts through the parking structure on Fen Lane, emerges on Commerce, and arrives at the Archdale loading dock from the south. He is there in 4 minutes. The app recalculating buzzes twice. Route deviation detected. He scans the package and walks back to the van. The buzzing does not stop him. The buzzing is not the problem. The problem is something he noticed 3 weeks ago and has been quietly, carefully thinking about since. The routing algorithm is not simply inefficient. He has worked with inefficient logistics systems before. Inefficiency has a texture, a kind of randomness that clusters and disperses unpredictably. What the Swift Drop algorithm is doing is something different, something with a shape. He pulls over at 8:51 a.m. in the narrow strip of shade beside a fire station on Colton. He has 12 minutes before the next stop window opens. He opens the notebook to a clean page. He draws the day's route as the app has constructed it in the sequence the app insists upon. Then he draws it again, the sequence he has been running. He holds them side by side. The app's route adds distance. Not at every stop. At specific stops. Stops located in zones 3 and 5, which are the zones with the highest concentration of restaurant, clinic, and office deliveries, exactly the categories that require ground floor loading dock access and incur the most parking friction. The app routes him through those zones via streets with no loading dock adjacency, forcing him to double park to run to absorb the friction cost in time and legs. The detour is on average 1.2 miles per affected stop. He has 6 affected stops today. That is 7.2 additional miles in a van that gets 14 miles per gallon burning fuel that the company is supposed to reimburse. He stares at the 2 maps. His mouth is dry. He swallowed the last of his water bottle at 8:15, and the depot does not provide refill stations. He uncaps his pen and writes 3 words in the margin of the page, then circles them. He writes slowly the way a person writes something they want to remember accurately. The load balance equation is inverted. He looks at it for a moment, capped pen resting against his fingers, the diesel smell thick in the closed van. The scanner buzzes. He picks it up, checks the screen, and pulls back out onto Colton. He does not know yet why the equation is inverted. He knows only that it is, and that the inversion is not an accident, and that someone somewhere made a deliberate choice. He does not know, pulling out of the shade beside the fire station at 8:53 a.m. on a Thursday morning in June, that in exactly 67 minutes he will walk through a door and see exactly whose choice it was, written 60 inches tall on a screen, worth more than his van. He is not falling behind on his route. He has been calculating stop by careful stop exactly why the system was built to fail him. The delivery assigned to stop 14 is not like the others. James notices it at 9:08 a.m. idling at a red light on Brennan when the scanner buzzes with a route update and a new entry populates at the top of the queue flagged in gold rather than the standard white. VIP priority, direct delivery, recipient signature required. The address is 1 Calder Plaza. He knows the building. Everyone in the city knows the building. It is the kind of tower that does not need a street number because it is the only thing on its block, 42 floors of glass and brushed steel, that catches the morning light and throws it back at the street like a warning. The package itself is in the rear compartment in a hard-shell black case with foam padding visible through the seams. It is heavy. He lifted it at the depot at 6:47 a.m. and logged its weight as 41 pounds in his notebook. Server component, the manifest says. Fragile. Time-sensitive. He is carried heavier. He is carried heavier up longer stairs in worse conditions and temperatures that would close the city's schools. He does not think about the weight. He thinks about the signature window, which closes at 10 a.m., and the traffic on Calder, which he can already see stacking at the intersection ahead. He arrives at 1 Calder Plaza at 9:34 a.m. The lobby is white marble, actual marble, not the composite tile that passes for it in the buildings he visits 12 times a day. Through the glass frontage, he can see a reception desk that is longer than his van, staffed by 2 people in identical dark blazers, and behind them a bank of 4 elevator doors with brushed gold panels. He picks up the hard shell case with both hands, kicks the van door shut with his heel, and walks toward the entrance. The receptionist on the left sees him before he reaches the door. James watches her face make a small, controlled adjustment. Not quite a wince, not quite a frown, something in between that she has clearly practiced into near invisibility. He has seen that face before. He sees it in lobbies like this one several times a week. "Deliveries," she says before he can speak. "Use the service entrance." She points left without looking left, the gesture entirely automatic. Around the building. The gray door on Calder Court. "I have a VIP priority delivery," James says. He holds up the scanner so she can see the gold flag on the screen. "Recipient signature required, floor 42. She looks at the scanner. She looks at his uniform, the company logo on the chest, the sweat stain at the collar, the electrical tape on the scanner's cracked casing. "Service entrance," she says again, with the same cadence as if she has simply pressed play a second time. The freight elevator is operational. He does not argue. He has 11 minutes before the signature window closes, and the route from the service entrance will take at least 4 of them. He goes around. The gray door on Calder Court opens into a concrete corridor that smells of cleaning solvent and old cardboard, the smell that exists behind every glass and marble lobby in the city, the smell of the infrastructure that holds the presentation together. The freight elevator is, as she said, operational. It is also occupied. A facilities crew is loading metal shelving units flat-packed and wrapped in plastic, and the foreman estimates 15 minutes before they clear the car. James looks at his scanner. Late, 000147. He finds the stairwell door. He opens it. He picks up the 41-pound case with both hands, tucks it against his chest, and begins to climb. 6 flights of service stairs is not 42 floors. The building's freight access tops out at the 6th floor transfer level, where a secondary elevator runs to the upper floors. He does not know this until he reaches the 6th floor landing and finds a placard on the wall telling him so. The secondary elevator is there. It is working. He steps in, shifts the case in his arms, and rides it up. His calves are burning the same low burn from this morning amplified, and his shirt is soaked through again, the cold sweat of exertion, not just the morning's heat. He breathes slowly. He steadies the case. The elevator opens at 42. The sound hits him before the visual does. Voices multiple layered over each other, the particular acoustic signature of a large room full of people performing confidence. He steps out of the elevator into a corridor of pale wood paneling, and at the end of the corridor, through a set of open glass doors, he can see the boardroom. He can see the table mahogany, long enough to seat 16, currently seating 12. He can see the massive LED screen at the far end, filled with charts and numbers in the company's branded colors. He can see the presenter, a man in a suit that fits the way expensive suits fit, standing with a silver clicker in his right hand mid-sentence. And he can see a woman in the far corner, small-seated apart from the table, a tablet propped on her knees. She is not looking at the screen. She is looking at her tablet. Her jaw is tight. Her left hand is pressing the tablet case flat, repetitive, unconscious. The kind of movement a person makes when they are trying to hold something very still inside themselves. James steps through the glass doors. The cold air from the boardroom's climate system hits his wet uniform like a blade. He does not stop. He walks to the nearest end of the mahogany table, sets the hard-shell case down carefully on the surface, and straightens. 12 men in suits turn to look at him. One man at the head of the table turns last. He has the silver clicker. He has the kind of face that has not been told no by a room in a long time. James holds up the scanner. "Swift drop delivery," he says. "Floor 42. I need a recipient signature." He just wanted a signature. He did not know, setting the case on that table at 9:47 a.m., that he had just walked into the center of a $100 million crime. The man with the silver clicker does not look at the scanner. He looks at James the way a person looks at something that has appeared in the wrong place, a pigeon on a restaurant table. a crack in new concrete with a specific irritation that is not quite anger, because anger would require acknowledgement. His name, James will learn later, is on the screen behind him in 40-point font. Thomas Reed, CEO, Swift Drop Technologies. Underneath the name, a logo. Underneath the logo, a tagline in the company's branded blue. Moving the world forward. Sign here, James says. He extends the scanner. Thomas Reed turns back to the room. My apologies, he says to the 12 men at the table, and his voice is the kind of voice that fills rooms easily practiced, resonant, calibrated for exactly this square footage. Apparently our logistics infrastructure has decided to join us this morning. A small ripple of laughter moves around the table. Thomas clicks his silver clicker against his palm, once, twice, a gesture James will come to recognize. Stand there, he says without looking back. He points to the far wall beside the floor-to-ceiling window. Don't touch anything. James moves to the wall. He stands. He holds the scanner. He is aware of the cold now in a way he was not when he first walked in. Aware of how visible the sweat is on his uniform, aware of the faint dust marks his boots have left on the pale floor between the elevator and the table. In the corner, the woman with the tablet glances at him once quickly and looks back down. Her screen, tilted at an angle he can partially read from where he stands, shows a budget ledger, 2 columns. The right column has a gap in it, a red-flagged cell that she is scrolling past and back as if hoping the number will change. Thomas Reed resumes. The presentation is fluid, the kind of fluency that comes from having delivered the same material many times to different rooms and learned which pauses land. He talks about market penetration, he talks about proprietary routing technology, he talks about the Swift Drop algorithm, which he calls without qualification flawless. The LED screen behind him shows delivery metrics, completion rates, customer satisfaction scores, all of them trending in the right direction, all of them in the company's branded blue. At the far end of the table sits the one man who has not laughed. He is broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit without a tie, and he has a yellow legal pad in front of him, on which he has been writing steadily since James entered the room. He has not looked up from the pad except once when James walked in, and that look was brief and complete, the look of someone who files information rather than reacts to it. His name embossed on the leather portfolio beside the legal pad is David Foster, lead partner, Meridian Capital Group. The Q2 numbers, David says. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. The room adjusts around the words. Completion rate is down 4.1% from Q1. Profit margin is down 2.8. You told us last quarter those numbers would stabilize. Thomas Reed clicks the silver clicker against his palm. They are stabilizing. What you're seeing is a correction curve, not a decline. The algorithm projects full recovery by Q3. The algorithm projected full recovery by Q2, David says. He underlines something on the legal pad. A silence opens up in the room. Thomas Reed moves through it smoothly, the way someone moves through a space they have measured in advance. He turns, and as he turns, his eyes find James at the wall, and something in his expression shifts, a small recalibration, the look of a man who has just identified a resource. Let me show you exactly where the friction is coming from, Thomas says. He raises the silver clicker and points it at James. The laser dot lands on the Swift Drop logo on James's chest. This right here is your margin problem. He lets the dot sit there. Uneducated labor. Minimum wage contractors who can't execute a simple routing sequence without deviating, delaying, and costing this company money on every single run. James does not move. He holds the scanner at his side. He watches Thomas Reed the way he was trained to watch a situation before acting in it, fully gathering data. Thomas sets down the espresso cup on the table, the small porcelain one that has been in his right hand since James entered $80 cup. James will think later, remembering the dry scratch in his own throat, the water bottle he finished at 8:15 and has not refilled. Thomas gestures at the screen where the delivery metrics are displayed, the red flagged completion rates, the declining times. The algorithm is not the problem, Thomas says. The algorithm is precise. What is imprecise is the human element. People like this gentleman who cannot read a routing interface, cannot maintain a delivery window, and frankly, based on the evidence in front of us, cannot be trusted to represent this company's standards. He says gentlemen the way a person says it when they mean the opposite. More laughter, quieter this time, more uncertain, the kind of laughter that a room produces when it is following someone else's lead and beginning to sense the drop. David Foster does not laugh. He looks at James for the first time directly. It is the same look as before, brief and complete, but this time it stays a half-second longer. James scans the LED screen behind Thomas Reed. The algorithm is displayed in a simplified schematic, a visual breakdown of the routing logic color-coded by variable. He looks at it the way he looked at the two maps in his notebook this morning, quietly, without expression. His eyes move from left to right across the schematic. They stop. He knows this architecture, not approximately. Not in the way that something looks familiar. He knows it the way a person knows their own handwriting. The CEO needed a scapegoat for the missing money. He had no idea he had just picked the one man in the room who could read the crime scene on the screen behind him.
Absolutely not. He paraded a working man in front of billionaires just to hide his own failures. If that were me, I would have dropped that 40-pound box right on his glass table. Imagine standing there, exhausted and dehydrated, while a man in a suit calls you stupid. Some people never learn.
Thomas Reed is still talking. He has moved on from James the way a person moves on from a prop they have finished using, and he is back at the screen clicking through slides, each one a new configuration of the same declining numbers dressed in optimistic language. James stands at the wall. He is looking at the algorithm schematic. He has been looking at it for 4 minutes and 30 seconds, which he knows, because he has been counting a habit from years of coordinating timed supply drops where 30 seconds was the difference between a delivery and a catastrophe. The schematic is not complete. It is a simplified visual built for a boardroom, not a technical review. But the core structure is visible, the node hierarchy, the variable weighting, the sequencing logic that determines how stops are ordered, and how fuel costs are calculated against time windows. James can see the framework the way a structural engineer can see a building's skeleton through its facade. And in that framework, in the relationship between two specific variables, there is something wrong, not subtle, not ambiguous. Wrong the way a bridge is wrong when its load calculations have been deliberately reversed. Our driver retention is strong, Thomas is saying. He clicks to a new slide. Contractor satisfaction metrics are up across all zones. James speaks. He does not raise his voice. He does not move from the wall. That's not accurate, he says. The room stops. It stops the way rooms stop when something entirely outside the script occurs, not gradually, not with a murmur, but completely. 12 men in suits going still in their leather chairs, the air in the room seeming to thicken and cool. Thomas Reed turns slowly, the silver clicker loose in his hand, and he looks at James with an expression that is not yet anger. It is something closer to amusement, the expression of a person who believes they are about to watch something embarrassing happen to someone else. I'm sorry, Thomas says. The completion rate decline, James says. It's not a driver problem. The routing code is mathematically flawed. A sound moves around the table, not quite laughter, something between laughter and its held-back cousin. One of the investors, a man in a gray suit at the table's midpoint, makes a sound that is fully a laugh, short and reflexive, immediately suppressed. Thomas Reed looks at James for a long moment. He looks at the scanner in James's hand. He looks at the electrical tape on the cracked casing. He looks at the sweat on the uniform collar. Then he reaches into his jacket pocket, produces a dry erase marker, and tosses it. Not handed. Tossed. The marker spins once in the air and hits James's chest, bouncing off the Swift Drop logo and clattering onto the glass side table beside him, the sound thin and plastic and very loud in the silence. Be my guest, Thomas says. He gestures at the whiteboard mounted on the side wall, 8 feet wide, pristine, unused. Explain algorithmic efficiency to the room. Take your time. He pauses. Unless you need to get back to your boxes. More laughter, real this time, spreading from the far end of the table toward David Foster's end. David does not laugh. He sets his pen down on the legal pad and leans back in his chair, arms folded, and watches James the way a person watches something they have decided to evaluate rather than dismiss. James looks at the marker on the glass table. He looks at it the way he looked at the algorithm schematic, without expression, without urgency. He picks it up. He uncaps it. The dry erase smell is immediate and sharp, chemical and clean. He walks to the whiteboard. Behind him, Thomas turns back to the investors, spreading his hands. Ladies and gentlemen, a brief intermission while our logistics consultant prepares his analysis. The laughter that follows is loud, generous, the kind of laughter a room gives to power when power performs for it. James stands at the whiteboard. He does not begin writing immediately. He stands with the marker uncapped at his side, and he looks at the algorithm schematic on the LED screen across the room, and he is very still. The stillness is not hesitation. It is the stillness of a person organizing a large amount of information very quickly, the way a conductor looks at a full orchestra before the downbeat. Before I start, James says, still facing the board, I have a question for the record. He turns to look at Thomas Reed. In your routing algorithm, the delta variable, is it tied to fuel reimbursement calculation? Thomas Reed looks at him. The question sounds technical. It sounds in his mouth like the kind of question a person asks when they are trying to appear knowledgeable. Thomas has fielded these questions before from journalists, from mid-level investors, from board members who wanted to seem engaged. He clicks the silver clicker against his palm. Obviously, he says, the delta variable controls fuel cost offset against route efficiency. It's the backbone of the compensation model. He says it for the room, not for James. He says it the way a teacher says something to a classroom loudly, with the faint condescension of expertise performing for an audience. James nods once. He turns back to the whiteboard. He begins to write. He writes quickly, not frantically. Quickly the way a person writes when the information is already fully formed, and the hand is simply transcribing. The marker moves across the board in clean, even strokes, and what it leaves behind is not notes. It is not a diagram. It is a formal mathematical expression, multi-line, structured the kind of notation that belongs in an engineering review, not a boardroom. The laughter at the table has stopped. It has not faded exactly. It has been replaced by something else, something that has no name but takes up the same space in a room. That silence does the collective breath hold of people watching something they did not expect and cannot yet classify. 12 men in suits, dead quiet. Every one of them staring at a delivery driver filling a whiteboard with equations that none of them fully recognize, but all of them can tell with the certainty of people who have spent careers around expertise are real. He tossed the driver a marker to make him look like a fool. He had no idea he had just handed him the weapon he had been carrying all morning. If you want to see exactly how this arrogant CEO gets dismantled by the very man he tried to humiliate, you know what to do. Now back to James. Thomas Reed lets it go on for 40 seconds. That is how long it takes for the laughter to fully die, for the silence to become its own presence in the room, for the shift in the air to become undeniable. 40 seconds. James knows because he is still counting. He fills the left third of the whiteboard without pausing, the marker moving in the clean, unhurried strokes of someone writing in their first language. Then Thomas moves. Stop. The word is flat, hard, stripped of the performance that has characterized everything else he has said this morning. He takes 3 steps toward the whiteboard. He stops 6 feet from James, close enough for the room to register the proximity, far enough to avoid anything that could be called confrontation. Put the marker down. James does not put the marker down. He finishes the line he is writing and caps the marker and turns around. He holds it at his side. You're done. Thomas says. His voice is controlled, but the control is visible now, the way a seam is visible on a garment under the right light. You have made your little point. You can go. He turns to the room. My apologies. This was clearly a mistake in judgment on my part, giving a platform to someone who should not have one. He can stay, David Foster says. The room does not move. Thomas turns to look at David. David has his legal pad open and his pen in his hand, and he is looking at the whiteboard, not at Thomas. He underlines something on the pad. Finish what you were writing, he says to James. Take your time. Thomas's jaw tightens. The silver clicker clicks against his palm once, twice, a third time. He walks back toward the head of the table, and when he speaks again, his voice has the careful pleasantness of a man who has decided to reframe the situation rather than fight it directly. What you're watching, he says to the investors, is a contractor attempting to interfere with a proprietary algorithm he has no authorization to access, no training to understand, and no legal right to discuss in this setting. I want that on record. He looks at James. If you write one more variable on that board, I will have you arrested. Corporate espionage. I have counsel in this building. The room goes very quiet. Not the held breath quiet of 40 seconds ago. A different quiet. The quiet of people recalibrating risk. 3 investors glance at each other. One reaches for his phone and then does not pick it up. The man in the gray suit at the midpoint of the table sits back in his chair and looks at the table surface. James stands at the whiteboard. He stands there and the projector's light washes over him from the left, bleaching the color from his uniform, flattening the Swift Drop logo on his chest into a pale ghost of itself. The marker is in his hand. The board behind him holds 22 lines of work, clean and irrefutable, and he is aware in a way that is physical rather than abstract of exactly what the room sees when it looks at him. Not the equations, the uniform, the tape on the scanner he set down on the glass table, the boots, the collar still damp, still carrying the morning's 6 flights of stairs on every fiber. Is this a mistake? The thought arrives without drama, simply and clearly, the way important thoughts often do. He has been in this kind of room before, not this room, not these people, but this architecture of power, the kind that does not need to raise its voice because the entire structure of the space amplifies it automatically. He knows with the precision of someone who has studied how systems work that the man in the tailored suit will be believed first. That is not paranoia. That is a documented, measurable, repeatable fact about how these rooms operate. The investors came here to give Thomas Reed $100 million. They have already decided somewhere prior to this morning that Thomas Reed is the kind of person who receives $100 million checks. Nothing James writes on a whiteboard will fully displace that prior decision. It will create doubt, perhaps. But doubt is not enough. He looks at the LED screen across the room, at the algorithm schematic, at the delta variable, labeled in the company's branded blue, sitting at the intersection of the root sequencing logic and the fuel cost offset model. He has been looking at that schematic for 11 minutes now, and in those 11 minutes, piece by piece, the architecture has become fully legible to him, not because it is sophisticated, because it is not sophisticated. It is a corruption of something he already knows. Something he spent 3 years building and refining in a context so far from this boardroom that the distance feels standing here in his soaked polyester uniform almost fictional. He rolls up his left sleeve. He does it slowly, the cuff folding back once, twice until it sits above his forearm. On the inside of the forearm in faded blue-black ink, a tattoo, not decorative. A series of characters, a unit insignia below it, a designation below that, a sequence of numbers. The ink is old, the skin around it has shifted with age, softening the edges, but the image is still legible, still specific, still belonging entirely to a context that has nothing to do with delivery vans and cracked scanners. Quartermaster Corps, United States Army. He does not say this. He does not need to say it. The tattoo says it for anyone in the room who knows what they are looking at. David Foster knows what he is looking at. James can tell because David's pen stops moving for the first time since James entered the room. He picks up the marker. He uncaps it. He turns back to the whiteboard. He is standing in a room full of Ivy League credentials and tailored suits, and $100 million check, and every single one of them is watching him. And the logistical battlefield on the board behind him belongs entirely to him. He begins to write again. If you want to see exactly how this man takes apart a $100 million fraud with a dry erase marker, you know what to do. Now back to James. He writes for 7 minutes without stopping. Not notes, not an outline, a full formal deconstruction, the kind that takes most analysts a workstation and a data set in a morning. James does it from memory and observation, pulling the algorithm's logic apart, layer by layer, the marker moving across the whiteboard in the clean, exact strokes of someone who has written this kind of analysis before in different rooms under different pressures with significantly higher stakes attached to the outcome. The room is completely silent. Thomas Reed stands at the head of the table. He has not sat down. He has not called security. He stands with the silver clicker in his right hand, and he has stopped clicking it, which James registers as meaningful, the way a battlefield goes quiet before something changes. James draws a vertical line down the center of the board, dividing his work into 2 columns. Left column, the algorithm, as Thomas presented it, the official schematic from the LED screen, color-coded and branded and built for a boardroom audience. Right column, what the algorithm actually does. The 2 columns do not match. They do not match in one specific surgical location, a single variable relationship. The delta variable sitting at the intersection of route sequencing and fuel cost calculation. The delta variable, James says. His voice is level, unhurried, the voice of a man reading coordinates. In a correctly built routing algorithm, delta functions as a cost buffer. It absorbs the difference between projected fuel use and actual fuel use, and it credits that difference back to the driver as reimbursement. He taps the left column. That is what this presentation shows. He taps the right column. That is not what this algorithm does. He writes the actual function. He writes it out fully in formal notation, step by step. No shortcuts, no assumptions. The marker squeaks against the board in the silence. In this algorithm, James says, delta is inverted. Instead of crediting the fuel difference back to the driver, it routes it forward to a secondary account. One that does not appear in any driver-facing interface, any public financial filing, or any of the materials in this room. He turns to face the table. The routing code forces drivers to travel an average of 1.2 additional miles per affected stop, 6 to 8 affected stops per shift, across a driver base of 4,200 active contractors. He pauses. That is approximately 7,000 additional miles per day company-wide. At current fuel costs, that is roughly $2,800 per day in unreimbursed fuel expenses, redirected, not absorbed. Redirected. The room is very still. Over 11 months of operation, James says, that is approximately $924,000. Diverted, not through a glitch, not through inefficiency. He sets the marker down on the tray below the board. The sound it makes is small and final. Through a deliberate inversion of a single variable confirmed on camera 20 minutes ago by the person who controls the algorithm as intentional architecture. He looks at Thomas Reed. You told this room the delta variable controls fuel cost offset against route efficiency. Your words. On record. He does not raise his voice. You just described the mechanism of your own fraud. Thomas Reed's face has lost its color in a way that is not gradual. It is the color leaving a room when the power goes out sudden and complete. He opens his mouth. He closes it. The silver clicker is in his hand, but he is not clicking it. He is holding it, the way a person holds something they have forgotten they are holding. This is... Thomas starts. He stops. He starts again. This is a contractor with no credentials, no authorization, no understanding of the proprietary architecture of a system he has never been cleared to access. Whatever he has written on that board is speculation. It is the speculation of an uneducated man with a grievance, and I want every person in this room to understand that clearly before we go any further. He said Quartermaster Corps. The voice comes from the corner. Quiet, steady. It is Sarah Mitchell. The woman with the tablet who has not spoken once since James entered the room, who has spent the last 40 minutes pressing her tablet case flat with her left hand over and over, holding something very still inside herself. She is standing now. Her tablet is in both hands, its screen facing outward toward the table. "I checked," she says. "James Anderson, retired logistics commander, Quartermaster Corps, U.S. Army, 15 years of service. His unit designed the forward supply chain routing system for active theater operations in 2009. She pauses. Her voice does not shake, but the effort of steadying it is visible in her jaw. The core architecture of that system is the framework that SwiftDrop's routing algorithm was built on. I found the DoD filing. It's public record. She tilts the tablet toward the table. The screen shows a Department of Defense logistics framework document. The title is visible from across the room. So is the author designation at the bottom of the first page. No one speaks. David Foster picks up his phone. He opens a calculator. He runs the math slowly, visibly, the way a man runs math when he wants a room to watch him do it and trust the result. He sets the phone face up on the table. He looks at the screen. He looks at the whiteboard. He looks at James. "The numbers match," David says. Thomas Reed takes one step back. It is a small step, involuntary, the body registering what the mind has not yet formally acknowledged. The silver clicker slips in his fingers. He catches it. He thought he was watching a delivery driver struggle with mathematics in front of a room of billionaires. He had no idea he was watching a logistics commander dismantle equation by equation the empire he had spent 11 months building on stolen ground. David Foster stands up slowly. He does not push his chair back dramatically. He does not raise his voice. He simply reaches his full height, which is considerable, and the room reorganizes itself around that fact the way rooms do when someone with real authority stops performing patience and begins exercising it. He picks up his phone from the table. He looks at Thomas Reed. "I'm going to need the room," David says. "Except for you." 3 investors stand immediately. 2 more follow. The man in the gray suit at the table's midpoint gathers his portfolio and his phone without making eye contact with anyone. In 40 seconds, the boardroom has emptied of everyone except David, Thomas, James, and Sarah, who has not moved from the corner. She is still holding the tablet with both hands, the screen now dark, her arms tight against her body, the posture of someone who has done something that cannot be undone and is still deciding how to feel about that. David sets his phone on the table in front of Thomas. On the screen is the calculator, the numbers still visible. Beside it, he places the legal pad open to the page he has been writing on since James entered the room. The page is full. Columns of figures, notes in a small, precise hand, underlined passages, circled numbers. He has been running the analysis since the first equation appeared on the whiteboard. He was simply waiting for it to be complete. "The DoD document," David says to Sarah. "Can you put it on the main screen?" Sarah looks at Thomas Reed once. She looks at him the way a person looks at a locked door they have decided to walk through. She crosses to the room's AV panel and connects her tablet. The LED screen behind Thomas, which has been displaying SwiftDrop's branded metrics for the past 90 minutes, fills with the Department of Defense Logistics Framework document. The title, the date, the author designation at the bottom of the first page, James Anderson, Quartermaster Corps Logistics Command. Thomas turns to look at the screen. He turns back. He opens his mouth. "This doesn't," he starts. "You can't take the word of a contractor over a proprietary technical system, the legal framework alone, the IP protections, the ND. As every driver signs, he doesn't have the right to disclose, to analyze, to even discuss. There are legal consequences here that if you proceed with this line of that this constitutes interference with a proprietary..." Thomas. David's voice is quiet, final. The single word fills the room completely and leaves no space for anything else. Thomas stops. David picks up the legal pad. He holds it open and reads from it, not for Thomas, for the record, his voice measured and flat. "Root deviation engineering through delta variable inversion. Systematic fuel reimbursement siphoning across 4,200 contractors. Estimated aggregate diversion over 11 months, $924,000 minimum pending full audit. Secondary account not disclosed in any public filing investor document or regulatory submission reviewed by Meridian Capital Group. He sets the pad down. That's before we talk about the SEC implications of presenting these metrics as organic performance data during an active funding round. Thomas Reed stands at the head of the table. The silver clicker is in his hand. He is not clicking it. His face has the quality of a screen that has gone dark, still present, still occupying space, but no longer displaying anything. David reaches into the leather portfolio beside his legal pad. He removes a document folded in thirds heavy paper stock, the kind of paper that costs money in a world that has moved past the need for paper. He opens it on the table. It is the funding agreement. $100 million Meridian Capital Group to SwiftDrop Technologies pending signature. He looks at it for a moment. He picks it up with both hands. The sound of the paper tearing is sharp and specific and very clean. He tears it once across and then again and places the 4 pieces on the mahogany table in a small, neat stack the way a person stacks things they are finished with. Sarah Mitchell makes a sound, not a word. A single exhaled breath, short and involuntary, the sound a person makes when something they have been holding for a long time is finally set down. Her hand goes to her mouth. Her eyes are bright. She does not look away from the stack of torn paper. David picks up his phone and makes 2 calls. The first call is 4 sentences. SEC enforcement, SwiftDrop Technologies, active funding fraud. He gives the address. The second call is 3 sentences. He gives the same address. He says the words corporate fraud and requests immediate response. He ends the call. He looks at Thomas Reed. Thomas Reed is looking at the torn pieces of the funding agreement on the table. He is looking at them with the expression of a man watching something he cannot reverse happen. James stands at the whiteboard. He has not moved since he set the marker down. He watches Thomas the way he has watched him all morning, fully without expression. He watches 2 police officers enter the boardroom at 10:43 a.m., exactly 56 minutes after he set a 41-pound case on the mahogany table and asked for a signature. He watches the cold steel of the handcuffs close over Thomas Reed's wrists, over the French cuffs of the tailored Italian suit, the metal sitting hard and specific against the fabric that costs more than James makes in a week. David Foster crosses the room to where James is standing. He extends his hand. James takes it. "I want to offer you a consulting contract," David says. "Logistics systems integrity, 6 figures. You tell me when you can start." James looks at Thomas Reed being guided toward the boardroom door, the silver clicker left behind on the mahogany table. He looks at him the way a person looks at a problem they have fully solved. "If you had a functioning brain," James says quietly to no one in particular, "you wouldn't have tried to cheat the math. He tried to destroy a man for wearing the wrong uniform. He delivered himself step by careful step straight into federal custody."
Fiction. But that feeling? Hard work is hard work, and the uniform someone wears tells you absolutely nothing about the genius inside their head. Have you ever had an arrogant boss treat you like you were stupid just because of the job title you held? Drop a comment. Like, share, subscribe.